Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have a mighty review of The King's Dilemma Chronicles. Now this is a game that you can get on Steam. I want to dive into it here, but really quick before I get into the actual full review, I was actually given the opportunity to play through this game and do a review on it. This is, I've kept everything at arm's length, trying to be honest with you that I was more or less in a way commissioned to do a review of The King's Dilemma. That being said, it's still going to be a fair and honest review. I am not going to lie to you, the viewers, to make something sound better than it really is. Let's dive on into it. Let's start with the basics. We got the developer and the publisher as Big Trouble Game Studios, which probably means we are in for some big trouble. Yeah, I know it was cheesy. I'll punt if I want to. Don't judge me. It's my party. The engine is Unity Engine. It was released for PlayStation 5, Mac OS, Windows PC, and Xbox X, October of 2022. Now that being said, the version I am reviewing is the PC version, and I would guess that there's probably not a lot of changes between the different various versions of this game. Now, what is the game? It is an RPG political simulator. So, essentially, in roundabout terms, you are not actually playing as the king. I actually had the thought that I'd be playing the part of the king, making the decisions for the kingdom. No, actually, this is more like the Game of Thrones, and you are the hand of the king, much like Ned Stark. And just like Ned Stark, if you make the wrong decision, your head will roll. Of course, that involves trusting the right or wrong people. But, so basically, you go through, you make choices, you vote with a council or against the council, which can adjust your political favor, and based on how your vote is what happens. There will be times where I really don't understand everything about the game, to be honest, after a playthrough, and I don't understand how a kingdom could actually prosper, but the king get dethroned anyway. He'd just be like, I'm going to head out now. But that being said, the things I really thought interesting is essentially from my very first decision, essentially the very first decision I made in the game made an impact on what would happen later. So everything has an impact. Some of it minor, some of it is going to be an extreme impact to the very end of the game. But essentially you are building up and preparing for some eclipse event that is supposed to happen, and essentially it is supposed to be the end of times. I've seen people saying their playthrough was an hour and a half. Mine was actually like 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 40 minutes, give or take. That being said, I did read every single thing, and I think based on how fast you read and how quickly or slow you make decisions, because some of the decisions I took quite a bit of time to think about before I made the vote. So there's that. Now, when it comes to the music, it is, more or less medieval style music, as well as the art. You're going to find the art and the music to actually be fairly similar to Kingdom Come Deliverance if you've played it, which if you haven't, I recommend you do. Got a review of that on my YouTube as well. But the art and the music seemed very familiar to me, and I really had no problems there. I think it looks good. It all works out great. I love how all the different, the art that does appear is related some way, somehow to the vote I am making, which kind of, I guess, if you will, gives some kind of context to what is going on. The votes matters. Every single vote mattered in some way or another. Like I said earlier, some of it really minor. Some of it was really impactful to what would happen down the road. The best example I can give is I voted approval for an expedition to find essentially this old golden palace, if you will. And we found it, and I made the decision to start mining it for the gold. But what that would do is because of the high influx of gold, it would actually create inflation. Kind of like the dumpster fire we're dealing with now, but enough of that BS. So every vote mattered. Now, there's also the different outcomes, some of them positive, some of them negative, some of them kind of in between. And the outcomes could be impactful at the very end of the game. There's also a bit of a random story arc to this, which gives playability. Basically, you're asked a series of questions at the very beginning of the game, and that essentially sets you up with what kingdom you're going to select to start with, what kingdom you're supposed to be from. And based on that, there's a bunch of different random events based on what kingdom you selected. Okay. There's also a lot of different government styles, or if you will, cane styles or reign styles, if you will. And that's also based on how you're going to want to vote and what decisions you make throughout, such as you can see there, the whole grid box, or almost the whole grid box, is yellow. And this is the chaos version. And yeah, the chaos is the really difficult one to run. I typically would run moderate, and I could get some pretty decent reigns out of moderate. So there's different types of reigns that you can run through, which adjust, as I said, is going to adjust how you're going to vote. I'm sure there's a real trick to it all, and honestly, I don't fully understand it, which I'm going to get into here in a bit. That being said, ran great. No glitches. No issues with glitches or anything like that. There's multiple houses as well, and with each having their own different goals, storylines, and etc., and also government voting styles. So that's going to change things as well as you can also form alliances, which actually I did here for a little while with one of the houses. Now, things I felt a little negative about this game, understand that this is a little bit negative because some of this might be more or less how I did my playthrough, and it might vary from person to person. One is certain parts of the stories seem a little out of order. I'm not sure if that's just because of me and how my votes were and what I did, or if that's really an issue with the game. At times, you feel really cornered and hamstrung with your choices that you make. Now, understand, when you're voting with the council, there's nothing, it essentially costs you nothing. But to vote against the council, it costs you political influence, and you're limited to how much political influence you get each reign, which most of the time it's 8. Now, with that being said, too, you can also sway the political influence of the other houses to vote in your favor by bribery. That I did not really try to do that much. With that being said, too, also, if you have alliances, your alliance to a certain house might sway how you're going to vote because you may not necessarily want to break that alliance. Now, that being said, at times, honestly, not even at times, just altogether, the user interface is at time odd and confusing. And honestly, while the game does a really good job explaining what the different parts of the interface are for, it doesn't really do a good job explaining how to control those different parts and just essentially what it all means and how it all functions and what's it going to mean if you do so and so, things of that nature. It does get a little weak there, and honestly, it took me my playthrough to start figuring out all the little niches and everything else of the interface. Some of the stuff I picked up pretty quickly, but some of it did take almost my whole playthrough for me to get. With that being said, the tutorial could definitely be better. And that's actually, I think, one of the weakest parts about this game is the tutorial is just kind of not very good. Don't get me wrong, it's really short, but it just doesn't explain everything you really need to know and how it all is supposed to work. With that being said, all said and done, the game is boring, slow-paced, but fun, actually. I really enjoyed this. I know it's all text-based. There's nothing super fancy. There's no great big battle at the end of the game that you're going to watch. You're essentially sitting there making a bunch of decisions, making votes, and deciding how the kingdom is going to be ran for good or bad. And I actually found it really intriguing. I found that as how the different stories unfolded would make an impact on the kingdom in different ways. May have it been because of a religious stigma or a technological advance or whatever along those lines. I just found it all really interesting. With that said, though, I think this is going to be a niche game. I don't think this is going to be a game for everyone. I mean, if Call of Duty is the only game out there that tickles your fancy, this game is obviously not going to be for you. But if you're, I don't know how I want to put it, but essentially if you're interested in kind of how a kingdom would run in the background, making decisions, things of that nature, I think this is actually a really good game for you, as long as you don't mind the whole text-based stuff. I mean, essentially what you're seeing here gameplay-wise is the meat and potatoes of the game. It's just a lot of reading and decision making, but I found it fun, and I can personally recommend this game for the right kind of person. That being said, the game is $14.99 on Steam. It's not a very expensive game, so if you're looking for a game like this, I would say yes. Spend the $15, get this game. It's fun. It's got a lot of ways to play. Your votes always changes how events unfold. So there's actually, even though a playthrough might only last an hour and a half, or it may last 3 hours, you could probably still put 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours in this game, finding all the different types of playthroughs and niches and just everything else that can unfold. So anyway, folks, finally, I got commissioned to do a review for a game, and it wasn't a negative review. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you all enjoyed my review of The King's Dilemma Chronicles, and have yourself a wonderful day.